We are live now, Chair. He's actually stating that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirsty, and welcome everyone to the Calderdale Flood Recovery and Resilience Programme Board meeting today, Friday, 1st of July. Thank you all for your attendance. First of all, do we have any substitutes nominated for this meeting, or apologies for absence? I think
Janet,
you
you're
might
on
be...
mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've just got apologies from Councillor Whitaker, Chair, no substitute.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And just members' interest, just to remind members of the need to declare any disposable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on this agenda. Feel free to do that now or at any point should things become relevant to you. So admission of the public, it's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of the items of business on this agenda. Okay, so just to go to the minutes of the meeting held way back in April to be agreed as a correct record and signed by the chair. Do we have any points or issues on those minutes at this point? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Chair, if I may just come in on one item, it's not a correction to the minutes. I think just an observation under item 28 on the minutes, which was the terms of reference of the board. We had the discussion last time around the potential for an independent member. And I think the action was to bring a paper back to this meeting on that. And I note it's not on the agenda. I know that may be down to sort of officer absence in the interim, but I just wanted to note that we probably need to just make sure that that is on the agenda for the next board. We don't want to lose that action.
No, thank you, Grenville. Good point, well made. And I think we'll make sure that that's there front and centre as a first agenda item for the next meeting. So thank you very much.
Chair,
thank you, Janet.
Yeah, there isn't a member present, two members present from the last meeting, so we may have to defer the minutes till either later in the meeting or to the next meeting. Okay,
understood. Let's do that then.
Yeah.
Fine. I know Councillor Swift will be with us at some point, so maybe we can do that then. Okay, so agenda item 5, we will be deferring this item. It should have been the flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy roadmap, but unfortunately we can't get someone from National to come and speak to us about that. So we will push that to the next meeting, but I don't think there's anything massively pressing on there that we needed to discuss at this meeting. Anything more to say on that, Joe?
No, I don't think so. I think it's it's the roadmaps obviously, and the strategy is for the next sort of 5 years, and it just basically outlines a number of commitments and actions from the EA and other organisations on how we're going to achieve the strategy, the FCRM strategy.
Okay.
So apologies that I couldn't get anyone here this time, but I'll make sure somebody is available for the next one.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. Councillor Lee, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just to express my disappointment that nobody's come up from the Environment Agency to make this presentation. This is my first time on this board, but I do know it doesn't meet that very frequently. And I really think somebody could have done better than deferring this item, because it's on the agenda for a reason, and there should have been ample opportunity to find somebody to speak. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just respond to that, please, Councillor Lee? The request for it to be on this agenda came quite late on. So it's not like I've had the 3 months to find somebody. It was only a couple of weeks ago. Ordinarily, we would make sure that we had somebody here for these items. So I can only apologise.
No, I was just going to add, thank you, Joe. I was just going to add that it wasn't something discussed at the last meeting. It was only proposed during agenda setting, maybe 10 days or 2 weeks ago. So we will make sure obviously we've got ample time now in time for the next meeting to make sure that happens. So we'll make sure it's there on the next agenda. But thanks for your points anyway. Okay, so moving on, we have the Flood Risk Reduction and Investment Group. So I believe this is you, Paul Swales, that's introducing this. So would you like to introduce yourself for those that haven't previously met you, and we'll let you get on with the report.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm Paul Swales. I'm the senior advisor in the same team as Joe. So that's the partnerships and strategic overview team. So I'm going to give a quick canter through an update of the capital projects. I'm going to start biasly with Mythenroyd because that's one I've been involved with for many, many years now. I'm pleased to say that it's another finalist in a couple of awards coming up at the Excellence in Construction Yorkshire and Humber Awards. So it's got 2 chances this time to pick up another gong, and that's in the civil engineering project of the year and value. So that's around social value to the community. So fingers crossed. In 2 weeks' time, hopefully we'll find out a good result on that. Unfortunately, some not so good news, but a second and third glass panel have been deliberately damaged in the village, and they will be repaired. However, this is like I said, it's the 3rd time now one of the glass panels have been damaged in different locations. So it might be that we might need to find an alternative because it is incredibly costly to keep repairing these assets. So a question to you, but hold your thoughts until the end, is around if the board have any thoughts about how we can try and deter people from doing this damage to the project. Moving on, Burnley Road Academy. So this is the primary school in Mythenroyd. We're looking at adding flood resilience to that school. And there's a site meeting set up in a couple of weeks with the interested companies to undertake that work. I don't think we're going to meet the school summer holiday window to undertake the works, but we will be considering, or we have to consider, other school holidays. So perhaps autumn half term will be more suitable. Then moving swiftly on to Hebden Bridge FAS. The Adult Learning Centre wall construction continues, and that's due for completion at the end of this month now, because we're into July. The fluvial design element of the project is nearly complete, and that's allowed the environmental impact assessment to start. The other part of the project, the surface water design, the integrated catchment models, that's between the fluvial and the sewer elements, that's complete, and that's being used to refine the design for the surface water element. And we're continuing with stakeholder engagement with Hebden Bridge, particularly for the people who are directly affected or will be directly affected by the works. And we're looking at submitting a planning application towards the end of this year. And prior to that, we'll hold a reasonable or a good sized public event so the public can have their say prior to any planning submission, so any tweaks can be made. And we're still looking at establishing an engagement hub in the town, because I know that's something that worked pretty well in Mythenroyd, so we want to continue that good work of having an engagement hub for people to come in and talk to the project team. But in the meantime, from August, we will have a presence at the Hebden Bridge Town Hall every Monday, 10 till 2. So again, people can come and ask us questions about the Hebden Bridge group of projects and any other queries that they might have, and we'll try and answer the questions. Erindon Hillside, so part of the group of Hebden projects, detailed design is nearly complete on that. And again, the planning application is forecast for this or to be submitted this summer. And a nice addition to this project is that we're exploring some NFM opportunities with a local landowner in consultation with Calderdale Council as well. I think that's going, I think the landowner is quite keen to have natural flood management solutions on his land or their land, so that should be good. The canal, recent turn of events, well, positive. The canal overflow project is being included in Erindon Hillside now as well. So the enabling works for that will start or look to forecast to start this summer. So it could be a busy summer, but that will include some disruption, particularly around sort of a towpath, canal towpath diversion. So watch out for that one. Stubbinholme Road, so this is a project I'm actively involved with. So the detailed design continues with this, and we've undertaken a recent review of the modelling around the turn-in circle area, so Longstaff Court in particular, to look at the options for this area and ensure that certain properties aren't at risk, and that has been confirmed, particularly around is it Mythome Meadows. So we've undertaken some survey work around there, and again, engagement. We're liaising with people directly affected by the works, and again, we'll have a wider public consultation event prior to the planning submission, and that's forecast for this autumn, and with early works starting hopefully before the end of 2022. Moving on to the reservoir storage project, we're currently developing the outline business case for this, which will set out the justification and proposals for longer term options to manage the Hebden group of reservoirs. Some really complex, and Grenville might be able to tell me more about this if we get questions on it, but some really complex work is going to commence shortly, trying to understand the impacts on water resources if the reservoirs are drawn down for flood risk. And this scheme actually is at the forefront of a national review of reservoir use for managing flood risk. So leading the way, shall we say, as Calderdale usually does. Park Road Elland is the next project. We're looking at beginning the strategic outline business case this month. And there's a meeting with our consultant, Arup, shortly to agree the scope of this work. And again, Joe will be able to tell you more about that project if there are questions on it. Copley Village, so there's a lot of projects to go through, halfway there. Copley Village, awaiting the results of the now completed ground investigation, and that will inform the design of the preferred option for Copley. Shorewood Road, a smaller project in Calderdale, but no less important. We're still waiting for the review of the tender documents to come back from our from our suppliers that are on the framework. Once we've got that, we can agree a price and submit the full business case. So hopefully that's still construction sort of late summer. This is a project that is really imminent, shall we say, compared to the rest. Hebblebrook, the outline business case is approved. Hebblebrook, planning submission is in. And a revised flood risk assessment has been agreed internally and submitted now as part of that planning application. So I think that's due for determination imminently. And our detailed design is nearing completion as well. But this project has the real benefits of lots of environmental enhancements. We've got a new wetland area, a realigned channel which will improve biodiversity. There's going to be an informal footpath. Better quality trees planted, and we've also identified a site in Mixenden to do some additional tree planting, working with Calderdale Council. So this is a real plus when it comes to the environmental solutions, but also reducing flood risk at the same time. And this is one where we should quite easily, in theory, touch wood, achieve our biodiversity net gain ambition of 20%. Walsden, the next project, so we're currently undertaking modelling for this, but we've also got a further funding bid internally to look at investigating, utilising Ramsden Clough Reservoir, the disused reservoir, which is currently owned by United Utilities, but we're looking at whether we can utilise that to reduce risk in Walsden, because that is one of the biggest contributing catchments to flooding in Walsden. And the funding's also going to be used for looking at wider NFM options to reduce or slow the flow in Walsden, along with hard engineering solutions in the town as well. Sorby Bridge, we are currently scoping undertaking hydraulic modelling for Sorby Bridge, because we need a better evidence base from what we currently have, because all projects are based on sound evidence bases, and we don't have that for Sorby Bridge. It's a little bit out of date, so we need that updating. So that's the next challenge around Sorby Bridge, is developing that hydraulic model, hopefully get it integrated with the sewer model as well. So I think we've got a bit of a data request in with Yorkshire Water for that. Brighouse, another major project in Calder Valley. Most investigations, that's ground and site investigations, are completed. The planning submission is imminent unless it's already been submitted. Joe might be able to tell me more on that one. But a lot of tree and vegetation clearances has been completed in preparation for the main construction works. For the surface water element, the detailed design for the new pumping stations is well underway. There's a new fully operational compound that BAM have set up on Thornhill Beck Lane. Visited there, and that's a good setup, so that there's plenty of co-location days that take place there. And the last two projects, Back Waterloo, so that's in Todmorden. A strategic outline case has been submitted for assurance, internal assurance there. And part of that will be looking at the different options to reduce the scour, because that's been ongoing for some time, and measures that we put in place previously haven't worked. So we're looking at a longer term solution there. But we'll also have to do some river modelling to, again, improve our evidence base. And then finally, Callis Bridge, still gathering data for that one. I think we're nearly there with the data gathering now, and then that will identify what further work or what further gaps that we have to develop that project. That's one that, yeah, it's always the first place to suffer, isn't it? Callis Bridge in Calderdale. So it's one that still very keen to develop further. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. I'm going to, Councillor Swift is here, but I'm going to use current chair's privilege for the start and just say a few comments, and then perhaps bring Grenville in to pick up a few bits of what you said around the reservoir storage, and then I'll move to Steve, Councillor Lee, because he's got his hand up. I mean, firstly, good luck with the awards for Mythen Road. Obviously, see them on a daily basis, and it has made a massive difference here, not just in terms of resilience, but in terms of place as well. So all the best with that. I'll perhaps let other people think about ideas around the glass panels. A sad blight, unfortunately. Can't think of an immediate solution apart from blocking them off, which clearly we don't want to do, because part of the benefit is that you've still got that relationship with the river, because it being a threat, it is still a part of our lives, and we like that. In terms of the Hebden Bridge FAS, I know you had some issues with the stakeholder engagement. I'm assuming they've been worked out. I'm just wondering what the nature of the stakeholder group looks like now, and how that's best working in terms of these new challenges and considerations. And then I guess thinking about, I'm not sure in Hebden Bridge where the canal overflow is, and clearly you're going to have a diversion. Are you able to shed any light on the location, and if you've considered phasing that in terms of events and other exploratory work that's going on as part of the FAS? Sorry, throwing a few bits at you there.
Do you want to come in on the stakeholder bit, Joe?
Yeah, certainly can do. Apologies. I'm going to turn my camera off because I keep losing you all again. Just one moment. Right. Sorry that I've not turned my camera off. Yeah, so we had some really good sort of reset meetings around the stakeholder engagement group, where we used an external facilitator really to agree sort of purpose of the group and ways forward. So that's sort of happened over the last couple of weeks, and I think we've got our back to sort of our routine meetings, which will be taking place every sort of 2 months, starting again at the back end of July. So that was a really, really useful sort of activity that we went through with that group. So really, really good that we're all on the same side. Yeah, and just moving forward with it.
Fantastic. Was there any other bits there, Paul, that you're able to speak on?
The canal, so I can tell you where the canal overflow bit is. So it's immediately downstream of where the Adult Learning Centre wall is being constructed. So it's that area there. So that's just downstream of Stubbenholme Road Bridge. In terms of the diversion and linking in with, or not, linking in with local events, I don't know, but I've just wrote that down, and I'll go back to the project team on that one, if that's okay.
Great stuff.
Were there other ones?
I'm not sure actually. Just to say as well, if you could just keep us cited on any of those policy developments in terms of the national review of the drawdown, that'd be really helpful. Perhaps Grenville is able to speak on what's going on locally or any of those policies.
Yeah, I mean, I will do, Chair. I think to be honest, I think Paul's probably kind of covered it in terms of what's going on locally and the work that continues with EA around the Hebden group. I guess on the national piece, then really, arising from the discussions we've had through this partnership board, the discussions we've had with local MPs, and other discussions that have gone on elsewhere in the country, particularly, I would say, in the Northwest with United Utilities and some of the work they're doing up in the Lake District. A project has been running within the Environment Agency at a national level, bringing together both their flood alleviation teams and their water resources teams. And I think this is probably the first time that those teams have kind of come together to really work through all of the issues, associated with using reservoirs for flood risk, including, of course, the vital one of water resources. So I've been sitting on the steering group for that national framework, along with a colleague from United Utilities. That framework is now out for consultation with certain partners and with a broader selection of water companies where this is of interest. And I think it provides us then with a basis on which we can begin to really properly get to grips, if you like, in terms of this issue across all of the various policy and legal areas. So I think it's a really positive development. It doesn't answer all the questions, but I think it does give some real clarity on all of the questions that need to be asked and worked through. And that's what we're continuing to do with the Environment Agency, both at a national and local level.
Great stuff. Okay, we'll look forward to seeing some of those develop and hopefully bring back any happenings to future meetings. Joe, not sure if that's a legacy hand or not.
No, not a legacy hand. It was just to around the canal overflow, just to add to what Paul was saying, is that the planning application's gone in this week. So as soon as we've got a link for that from the planning portal, we'll be sharing that wider. Obviously, we're promoting that, so you'll be able to get a sense of the plans and I suppose disruption for that area. But we're working really hard with CRT to make sure that's minimised.
Okay, great stuff. I mean, in terms of just briefly touching back on the glass panels, I mean, obviously the community are concerned about that, and maybe there's something more broadly around monitoring and policing, so it's less about what you guys can do and more about thinking about a broader presence, but not one we're going to tackle in this meeting, I don't think. Anyway, I'll move on to Councillor Lee, and then I can see Katie's got a hand up as well. Over to you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. First of all, I should say, Paul, thank you for that very comprehensive update. It was really useful. The first question is regarding drains. And I'm aware, everybody on the call is aware, that when we've had actual floods and near misses, there's been big problems. I'm thinking particularly the area that I know the closest really, which is Burnley Road, and that area along from Hebden to Mythen Road, all along there. That those drains have been blocked and or broken and anyway not functional on a number of occasions. So my first question, before we look at all of the other really interesting work that we're doing, there's a relatively easy fix to flash flooding off the hillsides, which ought to be dealt with readily by cleaning all the drains and keeping them clean. So could you reassure me that that is in A1 tickety-boo order? The second question I've got is about managing the reservoirs. I've always been a great believer in that. At various meetings over the years, we've spoken about it many times. It seems like a very obvious way of doing things. However, there are different preferences that people have according to who they work for or what they do. And Yorkshire Water's prime concern is to supply water to the area. I understand that. We as a flood prevention group want to stop the floods in the area, and catching the water in reservoirs is a very good way of doing it. I'd just like to know whether there are ongoing local discussions about this with Yorkshire Water. I'd be very happy to meet them at any time to fight the corner for Calderdale. I'd hope that the national look at this isn't going to delay anything that we could be doing here in Calderdale, because nationally they don't have the same pressures that we have very regularly in Calderdale. And so I think we should be getting on with our own discussions about how to do this. And my final comments on that is, I know that there's a priority for Yorkshire Water to supply water, but I do understand there's a network of reservoirs where they can divert the actual supply into Calderdale if it ever got that bad. And I think that this is a question of money, and there are costs involved in lowering the levels of the reservoirs. But I think the cost of actual flooding is far greater to Calderdale than coming to some arrangement about the cost of attenuation of the water in the reservoirs. So that's the second point. And finally, you mentioned, Paul, modelling in several contexts in your presentation. And I'm just wondering, on what basis is that modelling being done? That is, what assumptions have changed in the basis for the modelling that you're using based upon local events, which we know have stood old assumptions on their head about the incidence of so-called 50-year and 100-year cycles for weather conditions. Hopefully, that's been taken into account in everything that you're doing with your modelling. So that's my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Really good last point there. Not sure if all of those are relevant for you, Paul. Perhaps that last point is. So maybe take that, and then I'll sort of throw the other ones out.
Okay, yeah, I'll give it a go. So if I yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Lee. So yeah, I think the third one is more relevant to myself. So if I take Sorby Bridge for example, in terms of modelling, and I'll try and be brief, but we have very limited modelling on the River Ryburn. It's not an area the Environment Agency ever models. So basically we have very limited information on that. In terms of the River Calder in that location, I think our existing model, I think it's nearly 10 years old. So in terms of hydraulic modelling, it's either we don't have it or it's out of date, and we need up-to-date information. We will also utilise historical information, so whether that's anecdotal evidence. So for example, I've been in contact with Calderdale Council to get all their flood reports and what have you, so we know exactly where flooding issues have occurred and what have you. And we will utilise, yeah, like I said, historical data. So we have flow gauges and river level gauges on the Calder in Sorby Bridge. So we will look at all that sort of information. But I'm by no means a modelling expert. But we will look at historic stuff. We will look at similar catchments. We will undertake survey work. So it needs to be a thorough exercise, and it will be, so we can gather that, or like I said, get that really strong, I get essentially building blocks to start developing a project. And until we have that, like I said, it's really difficult to progress a project. And also I'm going to use Sorby Bridge again as the example, that since our existing modelling has taken place, we know that physical things on the ground have changed. We know that people have raised walls, etc., which won't be taken into account in our modelling. So we need to update all that information as well. So really paint the most accurate picture that we can right now, but also looking back at what's previously happened. I hope that makes sense.
No, that's really helpful. Joe, I can see you probably want to come in on that point.
I do, thank you, Chair. And similar to Paul, I am not a modeller. It's a dark art to me. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the Brighouse scheme, I guess, where we were sort of thought we understood what the issues were within Brighouse. We'd got, a sort of outline design, and then February 2020 happened. And so because it was such a huge event in that area, that catchment, and very different to what we believed was the mechanisms and flooding previously, we completely rerun the model again as well. So just to reiterate what Paul's saying is that we do take into sort of recent events, physical things that are happening on the ground as well, but also to reassure you as well that through the flood risk assessments that we have to submit as part of the planning application, we also have to prove through modelling that our scheme is still going to work / operate within climate change scenarios as well at different return periods. And that does cause us headaches because we're building for now, but we have to prove that the flood schemes are still going to be workable in 100 years' time, for example. So I hope that also sort of gives a little bit more confidence as well, Councillor Lee.
No, that's really good. Thank you. I think that...
Chair, if I could just come back on that very briefly. I think that my question hasn't been properly understood, or I'm not understanding the answers. My concern is the actual base data has so obviously changed. We've had 3 incidents in the last 5 years of once in 100-year incidents on old data. Clearly, that data is no longer valid. If we're using historical data or not up-to-date data or not data which is being re-estimated in view of actual events in recent years, and clearly the climate has made a big difference, then it invalidates the modelling that's being done unless this has all been properly updated. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the broader point there is that every event invalidates the previous events data, doesn't it, in terms of what's happening with climate. So appreciate there's more to do on that. Jo, are you trying to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I probably didn't explain it very well, but exactly what you've just described there, Councillor Lee, is what we've done in Brighouse. So we've updated the model with the recent event that's happened. We have a baseline that we use for the colder, and then again we sort of put the layers on top of that depending on what events happen, what physically is happening on the ground, like Paul was saying, evidence from partners and the community. It all feeds in and then produces this model for us. So we aren't just using historical data, we are building the picture every single time something else happens. Hopefully that's great. A better explanation.
That's great, Jo. Thank you. In terms of the second point around the reservoirs, there's probably some information on previous minutes around the work that's happening on reservoir drawdown that you might want to draw upon. And clearly Grenville said that any new policy developments there we'll come back with. But as Paul said before, we have sort of been leading the way on that. Grenville, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess just a couple of points. I understand where Councillor Lee's coming from this, and we have discussed it previously. Whether it be through this board or through the scrutiny panel, and I think just to be really clear on a few things, I think Councillor Lee used the phrase that it's our prime concern around water supply. I think we need to be really clear. It's more than just a concern. It is a legal obligation on Yorkshire Water. So, it is a legal obligation for us to maintain that water supply. But I think, just to reassure, we are continuing with those discussions locally. I don't believe the national work will hold it up. If anything, I think the national work will provide us with a really good framework in which to assess these things against, making sure we're taking all of the considerations into account from sort of the outset of discussions on them. I think in terms of, where reservoirs can help, I think we also need to recognise that they will not stop flooding, but in certain catchments, they can provide some mitigation and work alongside other solutions like the schemes that Paul's been talking around. And we need to make sure that we're continuing to take an evidence-based approach to where those benefits are. And that's what we're continuing to work with the Environment Agency on. So I just wanted to make those points in response, if that's all right, Chair.
No, that's great. Thank you, Grenville. And the other point around drains, because we shared obligation for drains, don't we, with lateral and the general drain system. But I think that's something we can assure that we're working on properly, and perhaps something we can revisit more thoroughly in a future meeting. I just want to give Katie a chance to speak, because just mindful. Sorry, Stephen. I
was just going to say through you, Chair, to give a better idea of what happens in the build up to an expected flood, including flash floods. The gully system is basically designed to take a 1 in 50 year up to a 1 in 50 year event. It's not really part of the flood alleviation infrastructure. It's there to drain the highway. Where we do expect to have floods, we do carry out gully cleansing in those areas that we know sometimes flood, and we will bring extra cleansing wagons in at that time. And one of the things that tends to happen in a flood is because the gully system, the drainage network gets overtaken by the water itself, you get surcharging. So water stacks back and comes back up through the gully lids themselves, and that makes it look as though the gully's blocked, but it's not actually a block with silt, it's a hydraulic blockage. And then once the water starts to subside, you tend to get a lot of silt and debris sucked back into the gullies, which makes it look as though it was that silt and debris that caused the problem in the first case. But in general terms, it's not. The gully system is maintained, especially in those areas where we know are prone to floods.
Thank you. And Stephen, you'll be aware, as we all are, that it's a game of whack-a-mole, isn't it, in terms of our flooding issues. From one place that's previously been hit by it, we're getting new places that are suffering fluvial and pluvial flooding, on a different basis. So it does continually need monitoring. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to Katie, I see your hand up there. Thanks for being so patient.
Thank you. Mine is really, really brief. So just on the community engagement side, on the forthcoming schemes, and just wondering whether there'll be anything set up in the other towns as you're going to do in Hebden Bridge, which is absolutely needed, so that the community can drop in and ask those questions. I just wondered if that was going to be on any of the other schemes. Like, I'm thinking about Brickhouse, where you've got a big compound set up, whether there's some opportunities there for regular drop-ins. That's my quick question. Thank you.
Looks like Joe is ready to answer that question.
Yep, I can take that. Just for a bit, so the hot off the press, we've actually engaged with surveyors this week, and we have been to see a couple of units in Hebden Bridge town centre. So we are looking at having a more permanent presence there. I guess we're thinking it's going to take a couple of months to get legality sorted out and them furnished. But yes, Brighouse. We do have the site there, but it is a construction site, so we need to be really careful from a health and safety point of view as to who can come and go on that site. What we will plan to do is a construction sort of open day, similar to what happened within Mythenroyd, because they went down really, really well previously, and just sort of, I guess, sort of judge what the community, the stakeholders are wanting in each different area, because I suspect in Brighouse we wouldn't get the footfall that we would do in Mythenroyd and Hebden. However, we're doing a lot of one-to-one engagement with businesses in that area. And again, it's about working with the stakeholder groups to what actually is best for each community. And I think that's what we would look at doing. It's a partnership decision. And if there was a need for that, absolutely, it would be crucial that we're visible and we're in there in those communities. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
okay, thank you.
That's great. That's great. And I know
no, absolutely does. Thank you.
And I know you'll be a dab hand at stakeholder group after doing Mythenroyd and Hebden Bridge, arguably. So perhaps some of the more difficult stakeholder groups. So I wish you well on that. I know that last time you did an event, there was a clash with, I think, scrutiny or something, and I think you've already said you're going to make sure our diaries are aligned on that. So
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. really good news about Hebden Bridge. I think that'll be worth its weight in gold. I know the one in Maidenroy gathered a lot of footfall and was really good in that respect. I see Councillor Tim's hand up, so what I might do is a handy segue at this point and pass the reins of the chair back onto you, Councillor Swift, if that's okay.
It will be fine, Mike. Yes. Thanks, Scott, and thanks for chairing the first part of the meeting for me. Apologies again for the late arrival. It was the first formal meeting of the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Partnership Board, the Care Board this morning. So there as an observer. So thanks. Yeah, I was just going to add on the brick house one, just to remind Joe's probably already thought of it, that the brick house bid has an office in the town centre that's open to the public, and that might provide a convenient place for occasional drop-ins and or simply as a location to provide information for people who are interested. I take the point that the public interest might be different there. Joe, do you want to, so you're coming back.
No, that's great, Councillor Swift. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that office, but that's certainly something to explore.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's probably the end of that item, the flood reduction and investment group. So I think we're ready to go on to the highlight reports, and first, which is the community resilience. So I think that's yourself, Katie.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep this brief. It's a verbal report only this time. So first things first is hot topic is flood hubs at the moment. It's come through the last couple of community resilience meetings, plus out from the community through flood wardens and community groups. There's clarity on what a flood hub is going to look like, how it's going to work, and how we're going to communicate that out to the community now, so that they know what they need to do. Off the back of this, due to not having this clarity, some groups have already put plans in motion for their own flood hubs. In particular, Todmorden Town Council approached me and I attended a meeting with them, and they've set up plans for their flood hub. They've got a document, they've got plans in place. They're working with Todmorden Flood Warden Group to do that. And I think this is purely because they haven't got clear direction on what will happen if we flooded, say, tomorrow. So we've had lots of discussions with emergency planning through my community resilience group about virtual hubs, but we don't have set things that we can say to the community at this point on how it's going to work. If there's going to be a telephone triage, what is that number, and how are we telling people what they need to do? Because at the moment, people will gravitate towards what they normally do, which is go to those spots. And we know that we don't have those spots set up in all the towns at the moment. I think in Maidenroy, in particular, doesn't have that space at the moment, which people would normally go to, which was the library, and we don't have that space. So that is a continuing conversation, will be a continuing conversation and a continual ask to emergency planning about how we go about communicating that and what those plans are. And we understand that things need to change, and that some ways of working during COVID have allowed us to make those changes. But we need to communicate those out and let people know how that's going to work. Then a couple of things around the flood siren. We, as flood wardens, we've been speaking with the Environment Agency on how we're going to manage those test flood siren warnings going forward, the frequency of those, and what actually the plans would be for the day. They would be on a smaller scale than before. So there isn't, as far as I'm aware, a practice day in preparation. So it's just how we would go about doing that, so people know that the sirens are working, they know what they need to do if they hear the sirens. There is appetite from some of the flood warden groups to do something more solid around those those siren tests. Just, you know, thinking about comms around it. Can we link in with the schools and their emergency planning, you know, not just the community but businesses as well, just whether we can do some sort of small scale event around it, just so that, you know, people are aware. I'm thinking more about tourists, but also new people to the area, but also people that are, you know, slightly complacent with flood warnings and so on at the moment, and how we best communicate that to them. So that's around that. Then drains, I'm going to talk about drains as well, unfortunately, because it's a big problem for us at the moment, especially with the flash flooding, you know, with these downpours that we're having, the drains are a problem. I will just remind Yorkshire Water and Calderdale agreed to do a report through Community Resilience about ownership of those drains, how it works, so that flood wardens are aware of who owns what and who we're supposed to be talking to in terms of unblocking those. So I had an ask, I think it was about a month ago, and we had a meeting just and I was offered some reporting. I think probably Stephen and Grenville could probably update on that. At the moment with public health, we've been working really closely with the team there on their actions within the plan. They are looking at doing a leaflet that will go out to the public, and it'll be based around an existing leaflet that's available with public health and the EA. So it will highlight safety and health around flooding, but also it will incorporate before, during and after flooding as well. So working quite closely with them on that, and we're just keeping that dialogue open so we can keep moving those actions forward. There's a couple of things that have come in from the flood wardens that have been asked to be communicated today. Mythenroyd have just taken receipt of a huge amount of flood blocks for their area, which will cover Mythenroyd, Braley and Rutherden Foot. We're trying to be more environmentally friendly, and we're, you know, looking at ways we can combat climate change, less waste, so moving more towards reusable items for flooding rather than sandbags and things that are going to landfill. So we will keep you abreast with that. They currently use them quite heavily at Hebden Bridge as well. So we've sort of taken some lessons from across there. At the moment, the Hebden Bridge group have got a set of mini containers, which is great, and these are for hillside villages. So we're recognising the fact that we're having issues on the hillsides as well as down on the valley bottom. And they have got 6 small containers which contain a small amount of equipment that they can use on the hillside, which is fantastic. They've cited 2 already, and they've got another couple to go at Dodnays and a couple up at Peckett Well and a second at Mythen. So those that's fantastic, and we may look at having some of those in some of the other areas as well, like at Ludderden Village and possibly up at Mitchley, where we know that they have issues. From the Todmorden group, they, as I mentioned before, they're working with Todmorden Town Council on flood hub plans and how that will work. They're also going to be doing some comms around their 10-year anniversary. So Todmorden group was set up in 2012. They've had just recently, in 22nd of June, that it was their 10-year anniversary. So 10 years of flood wardens in that area. There is an ask for radio training at the moment, first aid, refreshers and water safety at the moment. So I'll go back to emergency planning with that. And then just to mention that I've just recently been following the Flood Build Back Better stuff, which has been launched, and feel like we need to do a bit more of a drive on flood reinsurance and getting those people that feel that they can't get flood insurance to have a look at flood again. But if anyone isn't aware of the Build Back Better stuff that's going on at the moment, it will mean that if you flood and you claim on your insurance, you will be allowed to build back better. So you'll be able to have put flood measures into your home, which hopefully will ease the burden further forward and less insurance claims and more security for people in their homes. So I was extremely pleased to see that come out over the last month. And I think that I was trying to be brief, but obviously there's always lots to say. If there are any questions, please just ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. So on the last point first, the kind of promoting the insurance and so on, perhaps that's something Lucy can sort of pick up with you in terms of comms and what we can do there in the comms group. On the hubs, I'm not quite sure who the kind of where the lead from the council side in sort of taking that discussion forward would go. Right. Stephen's put his hand up, so I'll come to you, Stephen, if that's an offer. And again, you might want to pick up the drainage point as well.
It was the drainage point that I was going to address, Councillor Swift. That's with me, Katie. Timely reminder, and thank you for that. I'll ensure that something's prepared for the next board.
Right. So the hubs, is that Zora or Sarah? Help me with that one. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, I can pick that up and take it away. I'll speak to emergency planning, and Katie's absolutely right. And we've learned a lot, been forced to learn a lot, I guess, in terms of the pandemic and how we might respond. And it's actually trying to make sure we've got in place something which is both efficient in terms of triaging, rather than having council officers perhaps tied up in situ, where what they're actually doing is a task which they could be done by telephone or could be done online. But that has to be balanced with having that front door that people recognise and know where to go to. So I'll pick that up with Derek Ben, who is he's off with COVID at the moment. I'll pick that up with Derek and we'll get some comms going out on it.
Thanks,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So hopefully that's picked up the main points, Katie, and thank you for that very full report. Scott, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, thanks for the report, Katie. Definitely agree with lots of your points there. I wonder, while you sort of mentioned the fact that it's the 10-year anniversary of the Todmorden flood wardens, it's actually also the 10-year anniversary of the terrible floods that happened in 2012. There was 2 of them, and they both happened during the summertime. So, Lucy, I wonder if there's something we could do and or say about that in terms of, weaving and developing the story that we were thinking more broadly.
Thanks. Yeah, good reminder. Thanks, Katie. I'll come back.
Yeah, sorry, just to come back to that. I know that Lauren and Janine in the comms team have been in contact with the Todmorden Wardens to assist with some comms around that, which hopefully will come out in the next few weeks to recognise those floods and the fact that the teams have been set up and been running for 10 years. So that is already sort of in progress with the comms team. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more for Katie, can I go on to Grenville and the Natural Flood Management Group?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Written report within the papers for the board, so I won't go through that kind of in detail. I think just to highlight 4 key kind of updates or points for the board's information. I think the first one is around Nfm Grants. So further to the additional funding that the board kindly granted to Nfm tail end of last year, and the update that we provided in April. The Nfm grant scheme that the council runs was reviewed and tweaked. Some of that was learning a few lessons from feedback we'd had from previous rounds. Some of it is about making sure that things like costs included within the grant are up to date and reflective of the current sort of situation. So we had a new round of grant applications which opened on the 27th of May. Details of that process are on the Ion Calder website. We're letting it run for quite a long time this time round, through to the 3rd of October, really just to maximise the opportunities for landowners to submit applications into that process. And Ben Fenton, within the council's NFM officer, role, and also other partners are able to provide guidance and assistance on that. And actually we've made it possible for a certain amount of free assistance to be provided to applicants, both in terms of advising what may be possible on their land and also submitting the applications themselves should they want to take one forward. I understand from Ben that we haven't had any applications through the process as yet, but we have had an awful lot of interest with that, and he's checking in regularly with partners to see where we are in terms of that side of things, and to make sure that there's maximum visibility of this. We've got a press release going out next week around that scheme, and I understand there's going to be flyers going out through local events, including the Slow the Flow road shows that are being run up and down the valley over the course of the summer. So hopefully we'll be able to report back later on in the year on a successful round of grant applications. Second point, and kind of related to that, is we're continuing with botanical surveys. Those are restarting as of this month. The purpose of those really is to firstly ensure that we are understanding where we have valuable biodiversity within the valley more broadly, but also that kind of work needs to be done anyway as a part of any NFM activity. We can hopefully use that information to help inform and expedite future grant applications by having that background information available in advance. Third point, the consultants Atkins have recently completed some work for the Environment Agency under the NFM operational group and action plan sort of banner, looking at modelling opportunities for natural flood management right the way across the valley. The final report for that piece of work has just landed in the last week or so, and there is a debriefing webinar for stakeholders to join on the 12th of July. So hopefully that will provide us with a good basis, both of evidence as to where NFM could be possible, but I mean, it will be most beneficial throughout the valley, but also trying to set some kind of broader context, I suppose, in terms of what might be possible in terms of ambition for NFM over the coming years and indeed decades, I think. And then finally, just to let the board know that discussions are continuing with Andy Goldsworthy around the NFM as art project. We have a number of candidate sites for that, and we're just working through with site owners and other stakeholders around what's going to be possible on each of those sites. But hopefully we can unlock some additional funding for that outside the main flood programme and really create some interesting art installations up and down the valley that, again, kind of encourage people to get out in the landscape, but also understand some of the work that we're doing with NFM within the broader Calderdale catchment. So that was my update, Chair. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Thanks very much, Grenville. Any questions for Grenville? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. So communications, Lucy.
Thank you. You'll all be aware that we launched the refreshed version of Iron Calderdale website I think it was March earlier this year. We're in the process of developing a feedback form now, just to see how it's going down, get some feedback, see if there's anything we need to adjust there. It will be launching in the next few weeks, so if you go onto the Iron Calderdale website, it should pop up, and if you could share your views on it, that would be really helpful. We want to hear from stakeholders and from members of the public, just to make sure that it's giving people the information that they need. So that was the first point. Referring to the Slow the Flow Reg has already been mentioned. Janine and Lauren will be attending one next weekend. I believe it's at the Peace Hall, and sharing the council messages there about the work that we're doing around climate. And linked to that, next week, or rather tomorrow, is the start of Net Zero Week. So again, we'll be raising awareness of the council's work around climate change and what mitigations are available, and encouraging other people to look at what they can do to help us achieve net zero. Grenville referred to the landowner grants that we're continuing to promote until October. And then the final thing is that we'll be hosting the comms flooding subgroup in the 20th of July. And I believe there's a key speaker from Yorkshire Water sharing their experience with the Living with Water work that they're doing in South Yorkshire. I think that's everything, unless there are any questions. And Lauren's with us as well, who can answer in more detail than I can.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Any questions or comments for Lucy and on the comms report? No, not seeing any. Thank you for that. Yeah, just no thanks to Grenville for sharing the links about the Natural Flood Management Grant process, and just emphasising that the information about it is on the Calderdale website. Okay, resilient infrastructure, Stephen.
Yep, Chair, a comprehensive report has been written and submitted, so I will canter through it, just pointing out some of the highlights and leave it for people to ask questions after the event. So basically, moving through the report, going straight on to stage 2, you can see there is an update there on the current status of the Section 19 reports, and also an update on the flood incidences that have been reported to ourselves over the period 1st of the 12th to 28th of the 2nd, over the period 1st of March, rather, 31st of May, which is a decrease on those reported from December to February. You can see that 93 investigations have been reported, 23 still require a site visit and will be visited as soon as possible, but 44 have been visited and remotely reviewed. Moving through down to telemetry, it's good to report that 5 additional sites have been given telemetry, which means that they can be remotely monitored. Obviously, that saves resources actually going out and visibly inspecting. And the more telemetry that we can fit, the more effective our monitoring will become, obviously. Just moving down now, interesting to note, we have a comprehensive report from Network Rail. Network Rail have included some highlight of a joint work in Littleborough, which may not be within Calderdale, but given that it's on the borders, no doubt it will have a positive effect on the work that we carry out as well. Work in future years is then shown under the 3 bullet points, which gives us some idea of what Network Rail are looking to do over the next few years. Moving down now to CRT at 262, pleased to report that CRT are involved in finding the solution to mitigate the risk of flooding at Park Road, which, as members of the Flood Board will be aware, was something that was discussed in great detail at the scrutiny panel that we had probably 2 years ago now in the town hall, when the residents of Park Road were very concerned because of the economic assessments that have been carried out, pointing out that that was difficult. And I also point out at this stage that EA are heavily involved in that work along with ourselves. Moving down now to table or section 3, which is the table that gives you a summary of the work that we have carried out and the progress on those works. Overall report is green, as you can see, and I'm pleased to report good progress is being made.
Thank you, Stephen. So again, any questions or comments for Stephen on that update? Yes, Stephen Lee, Councillor Lee. Confused.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a question for my namesake. Thank you, Stephen, for that report. I've got the thing open at page 28 here with that little table in it, but I think that we could perhaps present that in a more meaningful manner going forward. From the numbers that you've spoken about, it would appear that in the period there was 93 investigations, of which 23 are ongoing. Mm-hmm. So I think if you do the maths, you said what it was, most of them have been looked at. But then looking down, it would seem there are still 152 investigations going forward. And from what I can gather of the earlier information, 26 of the 152 are the current ones that have been dealt with out of the 93. So there's 126 brought forward. So I'm interested in what is the proper progress over a period of time and the speed with which we're dealing with these investigations. Have some of them been under investigation for a very long time and still haven't come to any conclusion? Or is this a completely moving feast? So I think there should be more information about brought forward, carried forward, actioned, and some explanation about any exceptions in the brought forward that are still in the carried forward columns about why they've not been dealt with. I hope you understand the question. I think it could be more useful. Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right, Councillor, and I'll consider how better we can report that information. In the meantime, Mr. Fernley, Mr. Amjad, have you any comments to make to read Councillor Lee's observations?
Thank you, Stephen Mohammed here. Looking at the brought forward aspect, we have been looking at how historic some of these investigations are. What can happen is that we can get our numbers reduced and we're looking at less historic incidences, but when a flood event happens, we suddenly have a surge of 100 plus incidences to start looking at, which then skews numbers. Currently, we do have 64 of those investigations that are over 6 months old, which are a concern for ourselves, and we're looking at prioritising those and addressing those as part of routine activities. Thank you.
Neil, anything to add?
I think only to say it is a challenging area for us. I think the numbers show the numbers when it feels like it's been kind of relatively calm weather-wise, but constantly the numbers are coming through, and it's very hard to get it below the sort of numbers that are outstanding. And with that, as new events come along, we're having to reprioritise all the time. So we tend to look at properties that are getting internal flooding, which I think you would expect us to do. So sometimes those which perhaps aren't creating as great a nuisance and risk as some of the new ones coming through, they do tend to get put low down the order, which, as Mohammed said, can mean some of them can be sort of 6 months old before we're able to investigate them. But that's the process that we follow.
Okay, and we'll take back, Stephen perhaps take back thoughts about how we report this the next time to give a bit more clarity. So I think the thing I'm picking up from that is that, as you'd expect, it's not a simple first come first serve system. There has to be a case of sort of triaging and priority the greatest risk, but nonetheless, we don't want to leave incidents kind of on the books and uninvestigated indefinitely. So thank you for that. I hope that's helpful. Anyone else on the infrastructure? And again, thank you for that report, and interestingly, and welcome the sort of contacts and engagement from Network Rail in particular. I think that's really helpful. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, item 8, Yorkshire Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. This would normally be a verbal report from Councillor Scullion, who's not here. I'm not sure whether any officers are aware of anything from recent meetings of that. I'm aware people may have been off, so I think we'll simply leave that item for that time next and catch it up next time. So that brings us to question time, and Susan from Topperton Town Council, I know you submitted us a question which was sent around beforehand, but do you want to read it out for us?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to raise this question. I have written some context. Do you want me to read through that as well?
If it's not too long, yeah. Yes.
It is short. It is short. Calderdale is currently considering an application for 12 houses in Durdell Street in Todmorden. Planning applications dating from 2003 have resulted in the building of 2 apartment blocks and more than 20 houses on this site. The planning applications were approved before the impact of climate change was considered as seriously as it is now. This area, which is near the Rochdale Canal, is in flood zone 3 and it regularly floods. It also suffers from surface water flooding. As well as this, it is believed that the water table of the area has risen resulting in the flooding in the cellars of the houses surrounding Durdell Street, even without any major flood event. It is already acknowledged that the water table has risen in this area. There are concerns about subsidence in some of the properties caused by this. The residents of one property have had to be evacuated as the kitchen of the house subsided. This street is also a stone's throw from Liddell, which is a development which took place a couple of years ago, the site at which significant surface water flooding issues are still unresolved. Durdell Street, the block from 132 to 138 Halifax Street and neighbouring streets are at a much lower level than Liddell or this housing development, and any surface water floods there. The existing new housing on Durdell Street has been built at a higher level to protect it from flooding. The Environment Agency has supported the plans for the additional 12 houses. Drainage plans have also been submitted. However, this ground level is up to 2 metres higher than some of the existing properties nearby on Durdell Street and surrounding areas. This is therefore a serious concern about increased surface water flooding. The Victorian drains in the area are already struggling to cope with the existing demand in the area. Todmorden Town Council is very concerned that the proposed additional building on Durdell Street will exacerbate the risk of surface water flooding in an already vulnerable area. And then the question, what is being done to ensure that existing properties on Durdell Street and surrounding streets are not at increased risk of surface and groundwater flooding because of the building of these additional houses? What positive actions will Calderdale take to ensure that the existing terrace properties in the area, which are set at a significantly lower level than the proposed build, will not be subject to additional flood risk? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I mean, as you probably expect, it's quite a complex issue, and I know some of this goes back for some time. And I think from the brief inquiries I made yesterday, some of this, in effect, used some of the part of the problem in the initial comments. I think it's a wider issue in Todmorden. There's a number of sites where there are existing planning conditions which were approved when the requirements around flood prevention were not as rigorous as they would be now, and there's no easy legal way of unpicking that. But I do think there's work to be done and more to be done in getting a response for that, and we will get a detailed response from officers. Just for bringing Councillor Lee, can I just check, Stephen, I know you gave me a brief update about some of this. Is there anything you want to say at this point, or any colleagues from the Environment Agency? Possibly not.
Sorry, Chair. I think that this is something that our planning colleagues are acutely aware of, and a number of papers have been written and a number of investigations carried out. In terms of proactive measures to protect existing properties, as you're aware, there are numerous studies going on and numerous remediations being investigated and implemented in Todmorden itself, and we will continue to carry that out.
Thanks, Stephen. I just go to Paul from the Environment Agency, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Lee. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Let me take this one away and come back, because I'm not wholly involved with the planning application process, although I know the sites that Susan mentions very well. I was involved previously, certainly with Liddell in my previous role, but yeah, I don't know the latest, so let me come back. I'll find out and provide feedback to the group.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome that question, and I thought it was a very good one, and one that demands a very serious answer. I think there should be a part 2 to the question. Part 1 is dealing with the existing residents of that particular street, and I fully understand that. But I think part 2 is about our ability in our planning department to get up to speed with things that have been changing rapidly. I referred to this earlier on when I was talking about the assumptions being made in our modelling efforts. This is a very old planning application, as Susan said, predating a lot of things that have been happening in the meantime. And it just seems that it would appear this planning has been allowed. Now, Stephen Lee has said there's been, I think he said, a number of papers written and investigations carried out. And I'll take that at face value and believe that. But surely this situation, Chair, as described, demands very serious further consideration. You know, this is sounding like an accident waiting for the incident. And I'm very concerned about it. And I'd like to think we could conclude that we'll get some answers maybe from somebody from planning at the next meeting about just how much more work has gone into ensuring that we're not walking into a problem here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we will we'll get a written response, which will probably be an initial one and a further one when Paul's had a chance to look at the. We'll take Paul up on his offer on the Environment Agency one, and I'll make sure I'll ask that the response is not only sent to yourself, Susan, but is shared with the members of this board. So if there are things people want to bring up at future meetings, then that's possible. Thank you very much for coming along and raising that. I think that was the last item on the agenda. I'll just let Katie raise the point she put that she put in the chat earlier regarding the Slow the Flow events. Katie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So as you're aware, I'm a trustee at Slow the Flow, our Calderdale Natural Flood Management charity. We are having a huge roadshow starting next Thursday. So we kick off at the library, and we're having a huge amount of events going across the whole of the borough to, educate, get people enthusiastic about natural flood management, show people what we've done, highlight as Grenville mentioned, the Nfm Grants scheme, which we need to be sharing a lot more widely so that landowners know that these opportunities are available to them. We'll have interactive exhibitions. We've got a whole Slowing the Flowing Towns workshop at Todd College on the 17th of August with some key speakers there to talk about sustainable drainage and other methods of natural flood management that people can get involved with, showing people what they could do in their homes, businesses, schools, community areas. It's going to be big. We're really proud of it, and we'd love you to help share those messages for us, and please do come along to some of those events. I know that some of you are either volunteering at some of those events, but also invited, like to the launch and things like that. So yes, thank you.
That's great, Katie, and yeah, certainly endorse that and encourage people to attend them. Okay, so that's everything on the agenda. Oh, Stephen, you want to?
Sorry, Chair, I've just got one item of any other business. So if I defer it until we get to that point.
That's where we are. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Right. Chair, just to remind you that this will be Mr. Fernley's last meeting of the board. He is retired. I'm sad to report he's retiring, and his last day in the office will be next week.
Well, thank you for reminding us of that, Stephen, and thank you, Neil, for everything you've done. I hope you have a great retirement and many new opportunities from that. And can we formally record our thanks to Neil for his work during his time with Calderdale? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
If I can come back, Chair, as well, just it's been a pleasure working in Calderdale. I think I've been here for about five and a half years now. I've found it to be, really pleasurable place, great people to work with. And I think what we've got here demonstrated, I think, through this meeting is this fantastic partnership working, probably better than I've seen at any other councils that I've worked at. So I think it's a real compliment, I think, to Calderdale with what you've delivered so far, and with the work that you'll be doing in the future. And I'll be signing up to the flood newsletter, so I shall be following closely what happens. And as I take my walks through the hills there, I'll be keeping an eye on all the good stuff that's going on.
Good stuff.
So thank you to everyone for what they've done for me over the last few years.
Thank you, Neil, and get with our best wishes for the future. Thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.